Welcome to Politics Chat, in which I try to answer your questions about modern politics. There are some things in the news today that you would like me to talk about, and they're kind of no brainers. But let me give you a big picture first. As I said, have been saying for months, the summer was going to be bad. And what I meant by that, I didn't know the specifics of what I meant. A lot of people are like, what do you mean? What's he going to do? I didn't know what he was going to do, but I was aware that his power was slipping and his mental acuity was slipping. And that many of the things, he was able to coast for about a year on things that had gone well in the Biden administration, and that those things were going to fall apart. And that's where we are right now. You are watching things fall apart around the country. You are watching his popularity plummet. You are watching him madly try to stay in power. And what we are getting from that is extraordinary instability in the United States of America and around the world. And how this is going to come out, I have no idea. I will reinforce at the end of this that our behavior will have a lot to do with how it comes out. Let me start with the really big elephant in the room, and that is Trump's war on Iran. And I know that sometimes it seems like it's a little bit on the back burner because there are many other things going on. But the reason I'm starting with that is because in Iran, especially, Trump's projection of power, this idea that I can do whatever I want to do and people are going to kowtow to me, has come smack up against reality. And the truth is, he doesn't have a way out of Iran, that he has taken a situation that was not great. Iran was not our friend, right? The Iranians, some of them are, but Iran, the regime in Iran was not the friend of the United States and hasn't been for a very long time, and has been a bit of a pariah in the Middle East, more than a bit of has been a pariah in the Middle East. Iran was a problem for a lot of people, but it's been a problem for a while. And Trump decided, especially after his attack in January on Venezuela, that was quick and, in his terms, successful. He thought he could do the same thing in Iran. So he, and alongside Israel, which was backed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the two of them launched strikes on Iran on February 28th. Now, when they did that, they basically kicked a hornet's nest, because by attacking the way they did, they prompted the leadership of Iran, after first killing a bunch of the leaders of Iran, to seize the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 25% of the world's seaborne oil traveled and about 30% of the world's seaborne fertilizer traveled. And as soon as that happened, Trump and his advisors keep insisting that they're doing such damage on Iran that they have won that war. And they have indeed inflicted a ton of damage on Iran. But Iran is maintaining control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so long as they are able to strangle the oil and the fertilizer that used to go through the Strait of Hormuz, they're strangling the global economy. And that is translating in the United States to higher gas prices, higher prices, especially of food. But anything that you see in a store in the United States of America, unless it is a local store, and shout out to our local stores here, unless it is a local store, it travels by truck. And trucks run on diesel, and diesel has gotten incredibly expensive, and those prices are going to be passed on to the consumer. Now, those prices have gone up, and that's badly hurt Trump. And this is one of the reasons he signed that memorandum of understanding back on June 17th, a very hastily thrown together deal that it appears he didn't quite understand, because people who looked at it at the time looked at it and said, gee, it sure looks like you're saying Iran gets control of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Iran interpreted it that way. Iran has said, to ships that wants to the ownership of the ships that want to transit the Strait of Hormuz, that they're going, there's free passage for 60 days, theoretically, under that memorandum of understanding. But after that, they're going to have to pay fees. This is an attack on the concept of the freedom of the seas, which the United States has been a big supporter of since 1941. It has been what has created this world trade that has enabled the costs of things to go significantly down relatively to the people's income after World War II, and that has created so many prosperous countries in the globe since World War II. And Iran's simply saying, no, it's our strait. Now, Trump is trying desperately to get back to where he was on February 27th. And remember, that itself was a step down from where we had been under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was hammered out in 2015 under the Obama administration, but was hammered out by a number of different countries, including China and France and Germany and the United Kingdom and the United States of America. They had hammered out this deal with Iran that stopped its enrichment of uranium for nuclear weapons capabilities. And Trump tore that up in 2018. And about a year later, Iran again began to enrich uranium. So what he has done is he kicked this hornet's nest, and there appears really to be no way out that isn't going to involve really smart minds over a really long time. I think the JCPOA took 20 months to negotiate. And right now, Trump's got nobody over there negotiating except his son-in-law and his special envoy to the Middle East, who's a business partner. Neither one of them have any training in negotiations. So here he is with Iran hanging out there. But the reason that this is becoming an even bigger deal right now is twofold. First, one of the ways that the United States kept oil prices as low as they did, even though they were going up, they could have gone up much more, is that the government has been releasing petroleum from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is a reserve that we've had around since, I think it's the early 1980s. I don't remember. It was after the last oil crisis, that is supposed to provide a buffer in case there are these moments when you get a pinch in oil, or where for some reason or another you need to have get more oil on the market. And first, that reserve was low because Biden had used some of it and Trump never replaced it. And then he's been releasing it. It is now at the lowest level since 1983. And the people who are watching oil right now are saying, our reserves are running out. And when they do, there's nothing we can do to get those back. That's not, I mean, the oil prices are going to skyrocket. And you occasionally hear people from the administration saying, well, we produce so much oil, it's not a problem. Except once again, remember, the oil that the United States produces, and indeed we're an exporter of oil, but the oil that we produce is not the kind we use. So that our refineries can't handle that oil. So we operate in the same international markets that everybody else does. So that is a problem. But the other problem is that Trump has been even more erratic than usual. And yesterday, I believe it was, the strikes between the US and the Iranians have been mounting for the last 5 days again. And Trump began to say yesterday morning, I think it was, I've lost track of days, so maybe it was a day or two ago, that he was going to attack power plants and bridges in Iran. Now, first of all, that's against international law. You can't go after civilian infrastructure. That's a war crime. Not always, but almost always. And in this case, it certainly sounds as if he is threatening a war crime. So aside from that, which is big enough, immediately the leaders of Iran said to their allies, I'm sorry, this seems confusing. In my mind, it's actually kind of not confusing because I think of them sort of as a group. The Iranians back Hezbollah, um, and the Houthis in Lebanon and the Hamas. There we go. So they back all of those non-state actors. And what they have said to the Houthis in Yemen is if Trump even thinks about or goes after a power plant in Iran, you need to threaten another strait, another import. There's two major straits through which oil comes out of the Middle East, and the other one is the El Mandab, the Bab El Mandab Strait, that is the opening of the Red Sea into what is eventually into the world oceans. And again, a choke point. And if that happens and they cut that oil out as well, we're really up the creek without a paddle. And so all of this is going on right now. And Trump is blustering and he's yelling. And I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a way out other than using the skills that Trump's people don't have and that would admit he really messed this up in a really big way. Okay, so there's that out there, but then of course we also have the renewed fury over the immigration sweeps that the Trump administration has been engaging in. And I talked about that a lot on Tuesday, so I'm not going to take a lot of time with it now. But those are not popular. They never have been popular, and they are getting less popular. I do want to reiterate a theme in American history that we don't pay enough attention to, and that is whenever the government goes after a population, the people who get they always say they're going after criminals, they're going after warriors, they're going after the bad guys. They always go for the low-hanging fruit. Those are going to be children, the elderly, people who are voluntarily turning themselves in. It's just easier and safer than going after the people that you tell Americans you're going after. And that's one thing always to be aware of when you look at Indigenous history, for example. When the government said it was going after the warriors, invariably they end up going for the peaceful communities and that have women and children in them because it's just easier and you don't have to worry about getting shot. So we're sort of seeing, not sort of, you are seeing that same thing here now, and people are aware of that. They're seeing that the people that are getting dragged out of their cars, for example, out of their homes, but certainly out of their cars and being shot too within a week over the last 10 days or so, were both not the targets of the investigation. They were people who appear to have been racially profiled, pulled out of their cars and shot and killed, even though at least one of them appears to have been in the United States legally. And people don't like that. They don't like to see their neighbors killed. So that's heating up as well. But there's other stuff going on. So one of the things that Americans have become used to is the idea that the government was going to try and keep some guardrails up to keep us safe. And the fact that we have this foodborne illness outbreak across the country that has sickened at this point, I believe is up to 7,000 known cases of it. And because the CDC has not been tracking this particular pathogen, it stopped doing so last July as part of the attempt to cut back at the US government. Now it only tracks salmonella and toxin producing E. coli, and it's no longer tracking 6 other pathogens. They're not really able to figure out what happened. And that's the sort of thing we have become accustomed to, that the government is going to be able to say, there's been a problem in our food supply. This is what you shouldn't eat. And in this case, they're simply saying, we don't know what it is. This could be a lot of things. And that is unsettling for a lot of people, especially in the summer when it appears that there is some kind of a link between fresh produce and this pathogen. And this is when a lot of us actually eat fresh produce, and that's just really unsettling not to know what's okay and what's not. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole. Every time I see advice that you should wash your hands before you handle food and after you use the bathroom, I just get the heebie-jeebies, because let me tell you right now, if you're not doing those things, whether or not there's a foodborne illness around, learn to do them, because that's just nasty, right? Wash your hands all the time. It's a good thing to do. But that's not everything as well. So we have that out there. But if you've been watching the news, you're also seeing that more than 100 million Americans, about 117 million right now, are dealing with truly horrific air quality. And that air quality is because of more than 100 wildfires in Canada and many in northern Minnesota as well. And those are all regions that are burning in part because the climate change that has changed rainfalls has really dried out places that are not accustomed to having that kind of dry weather. And we've got these raging wildfires that make it really clear that we can't continue to ignore climate change. And the Biden administration, of course, said we can deal with climate change and bring jobs. And they brought in battery factories and solar power factories. And it really seemed like we were going to be able to make that transition. And Trump, of course, is all petrochemicals and tore all that up and has literally taken our tax dollars to pay companies not to build wind farms. And the battery factory, the Korean battery factory that was coming to the south, of course, they rounded up the Koreans that were in it, and they just said, we're out of here. This is, we can't be, it's not safe here any longer. You watch that and you recognize that as of today, Detroit, Chicago, and I think it's Minneapolis are three of the most polluted cities on the globe right now. Three of the five top polluted cities in the globe. And again, Americans are not accustomed to having that happen and having basically having the government say, good luck. But at the same time, those same changes in weather patterns that scientists, by the way, said all along were going to happen is bringing more flooding to Texas, to the Texas hills, that same place that flooded last year and so tragically took out that children's camp. There was a river down there that rose 25 feet in 1 hour. There was so much rainfall. And so we're watching this destabilization of our country, which had been coming for a long time. But to have the government say, good luck with that. We're going to, this climate change is just a scam. It doesn't exist. Addressing it is a green scam. That's just obviously wrong. I mean, it just, even if you're not reading the scientific papers, you can look at the fact you can't breathe in Detroit right now or in Chicago right now and say, we have a problem. I mean, even here Tuesday, when my friend and I were out swimming, it was her birthday, by the way, not mine. The sun was red. I took a bunch of pictures of it because it was, you could tell that here in Maine, that we were seeing the haze from the fires. And there's that going on. But then you also have more stories about the reflecting pool, which Trump, of course, made the changes to without any permission, without any reviews, with nothing else. He just decided he was going to do it because he thinks of himself as, sort of an autocrat. And of course, everything went south in a hurry. It turned really poorly, really quickly. And what the administration did then was to blame vandals. And, we can all look at that and see that it was not vandals. And now that they've drained it again, there's a story in the Washington Post today where 4 different reporters, and you always kind of look for, there's certain things you look for in when you're trying to look at big stories. And one of them is there are certain names you look for, but one is when you have multiple people reporting on a story, that means they've really thrown resources at it. There were 4 reporters on this particular story and 2 more people contributed to the report. They went down and they got experts to come look at the reflecting pool that Trump insists somebody slashed for 350 feet. And they're like, look, all the seams parted. And the seams parted because they weren't put together right. And the White House said, no, that's not true. It was vandals. And, maybe somebody still believes that, but oh, come on. And you're also seeing stories like the idea that Trump is building a helipad at the White House with no review. He just decided he's going to do it. And the more you see of this, and the more you see him just assuming he's going to do things and then watch it fall apart, you can see the frustration of the American people and the fact that Trump is lashing out at them. So one of the things that's happened since that reflecting pool is the Department of Justice indicted and charged a 67-year-old cyclist who came down and fortunately photographed the pool before he touched it. And he touched it, and they jumped on him and said, the police jumped on him and said he had vandalized it. And he said, "No, I didn't. I touched it." And they've charged him, but it's going to be I mean, it's embarrassing. The whole thing is embarrassing to watch this happen. So you have all these things going on, and at the same time, there's other structural problems with the Republican Congress right now. So there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen in Congress. This has been the most do nothing Congress in American history. But among other things, it needs actually to pass some measures. And one of the measures that the Pentagon insists needs to pass is, it says it needs more money, that it's basically run through a lot of its munitions on Trump's war, not only in Iran, but remember, he struck a whole slew of countries before he went after Iran. And the yesterday, the House Budget Committee tried to put forward, or did put forward, its plan for a $95 billion supplemental spending plan. But even before it came into the House, the Republicans, I'm not even talking about the Democrats yet, the Republicans were all furious because Trump had invited all the far right Freedom Caucus members on the Budget Committee to Camp David to talk about this, and he confiscated their phones when they were there. But he didn't ask anybody who wasn't on the Freedom Caucus, so who was on the Budget Committee. And these other people learned about this, they were like, "What are you talking about? You can't go off and walk away from those of us on the stupid committee and make a plan with the president and don't talk to us." So one of them said, "I'm going to whip no's on this, so that I'm going to try and get people to vote no, because you can't do this." And and in addition to that, a number of the people who were not on the budget committee looked at this and said, "You're adding another almost $100 billion to the national debt, and you haven't proposed any way to offset that. And you can't keep doing this." So that's even before you get the Democrats involved. And the Democrats were like, "Okay, it's about $70 billion, 73, I think it is, for this incredibly unpopular war. You're tossing $12 billion at American farmers who are in real trouble from the Trump's tariff wars, but also because the administration is really encouraging consolidation, so that farmers are going bankrupt in high numbers. Small farmers are going bankrupt, but they're also losing their farms to consolidation. So you're throwing money at the farmers, and then you're looking for 10 billion with a B dollars to implement the provisions of that Save America Act, the Voter Suppression Act that Trump wants, that can't pass through Congress. So he's just trying to go in through a defense authorization. And the Democrats are like, this is me talking, not them. "Sorry, but we missed the news flash about hell freezing over. This is not going to happen." At the same time, in the Senate, you have the sudden death of Lindsey Graham last weekend. And by the way, it's been very odd how there were a whole bunch of obituaries and people said some nice stuff. And now it's like the man never existed, which at least in the news today, I actually did a search for him, because I'm like, man, the water closed over his head fast, which I thought that was, I mean, I'm not surprised, but it does say something about legacy and what people remember. Um, anyway, I was a little nonplussed by that. Anyway, Lindsey Graham was a big deal. Lindsey Graham was the chair of the Judiciary Committee. So if you remember, he screamed and ranted and raved, and that's what really turned the trick for Brett Kavanaugh to get on the Supreme Court. He's the guy, Lindsey Graham is the guy who ushered through a lot of Trump's appointments to the judiciary. And he was also on the Budget Committee. And of course, that in the Senate. And of course, now that's a problem because of this budget supplemental that's going to be very, very difficult to get through. And then you also have the missing Mitch McConnell. And the fact that Mitch McConnell, or somebody released that picture of Mitch McConnell saying, "I'm fine," basically, on the same day that news broke that Lindsey Graham had died unexpectedly, suddenly, um, suggested that the head of the Republicans in the Senate is feeling under an extreme amount of pressure because those were two of his key votes. And while the Democrats only have 47 votes, I believe, in the Senate, there are two independents as well who tend to vote with the Democrats, and that's Angus King, an independent of Maine, and Bernie Sanders, an independent of Vermont. So the Republicans can't afford to lose any votes in the Senate either. Now, at the same time, Trump's popularity is plummeting. It's down there close to 30, and his handling of the economy is below. His handling of the economy is so unpopular. It's down under the level that I always said you couldn't get below in the United States. People are really, really, really unhappy about the economy. So you're looking at this sort of perfect storm at the same time that Trump is falling apart mentally, or at least so he seems to be. If you watch his speeches, if you listen to the things he says, if you even read his social media, which I've shown you how to do by going to Trump's Truths, they're unhinged. They're simply unhinged, and as they get more unhinged, people are starting to ignore him, which to somebody like Trump is arsenic, right? The idea that he is being ignored is infuriating, and he does not want that to happen. So where am I going with all this? Trump is madly trying to stuff loyalists in the administration to prop him up. And we have right now, over the course of the last 2 days, we have the his attempt to add a new director of national intelligence to replace Tulsi Gabbard. That man is named Jay Clayton, who is currently at the Southern District, is the U.S. Attorney at the Southern District of New York. And Clayton has been slow walking the release of the Epstein files. Trump is also trying to put in at Attorney General Todd Blanche, who is now the acting Attorney General. He was the Deputy Attorney General to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. And now I've just said the word Attorney General so many times, you're probably all glazed over. But the reason all that matters is Todd Blanche is Trump's former criminal defense attorney. And he's the guy who went and interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's associate. And after that interview, she got moved to a cushy prison that she shouldn't have been allowed to go to because of her status as a sex offender. So it sure looks like Trump is trying to stuff all the loyalists he can around him. And it's definitely worth looking at that a number of those have been covering up the Epstein files. Now, remember as well, he finally had to, he didn't have to pay up. There had been money put in escrow as he fought against the lawsuit brought by E. Jean Carroll. He has now lost that. That money has gone to E. Jean Carroll. So he lost on that account of sexual, it was I'm not sure if that was a sexual assault suit. And then there was a defamation suit. One was a huge sum of money. One was a lesser sum of money. Although $5 million is still a pretty big sum of money. He did have to pay that. I think it was last week. But Epstein is still out there. And that material is still out there. So you got all this stuff going on. You could have a president say, I'm going to get away from these things by becoming the most popular president in the world. I'm going to do what people really want. I'm going to have universal health care. I'm going to, you could go through the list of things people want. Trump is throwing money at people. He's certainly trying to say, I'm going to cut checks for you people, whether or not that's going to happen. Think about the $1.776 billion slush fund. But what he is really trying to do is to make it impossible for us to vote him out. So where am I going with that? You know about his attempt to pass the SAVE Act. I've talked about it a lot. You know about his cutting of the many different ways in which our elections are protected. He's pulled states out of the ERIC system. You can look it up. I'm not going to go do it now. That makes sure there isn't duplication in voter lists in each side. He has gotten rid of the the election committee, the committee that helps local and state elections run their elections. He's repeatedly tried to attack the 2026 and presumably the 2028 elections, because he says if he doesn't, Republicans will never be elected again. And he's not wrong in the sense that the Republicans are so unpopular right now. People are swinging to the Democrats in huge numbers. That doesn't mean they're becoming Democrats, but they're saying that they will vote for the Democrats. And people like me think we are seeing the rise of a new political system that is there's going to be a sort of super party that may or may not use the name Democratic, but that eventually the Republicans will jump off the cliff and all become fascists or whatever they're going to do. And that mainstream party will split in two again. But right now, there's a whole bunch of us who think what the Republicans are doing is really, really, really bad news. So where am I going with that? He's trying to suppress the vote with this SAVE Act, and the Senate's saying we're not going to pass it. And everybody is saying, look, you've lost all your legal cases, like literally all the legal cases. When you have tried to prove that the 2020 election was stolen, you've lost all of them. Massey, who is a Republican from Kentucky, is like, what are you talking about? Like, you are saying that the 2016 election that you won was rigged. It was run by Democrats. The 2020 election that you say was rigged, you ran it. And 2024, when the Democrats were in charge again, you won again. So this just doesn't make any sense at all. So with the recalcitrance of Congress to go ahead and do what he wants, and with his inability to get any traction in the courts, it appears that tonight he is going to make some big announcement, probably about elections. Now, interestingly enough, if you've been watching the news today, the Republicans don't appear to know what he's going to say. And there was a headline in Politico today saying they're all panicked because who knows what he's going to say? All they know is it's not going to be popular. Because at this point, the vast majority of Americans don't believe anything Trump says anymore anyway. So the last thing you want him to do is get out there and say something outrageous as a Republican, because it's going to get even worse, right? But I've been watching today for the last 3 days since they've been teasing this speech. I think they let it out there because they're trying to see what discussion is going to be and how much pushback there's going to be on this speech. And they're going to tailor it to see what they think he can get away with saying. But the whole buildup from the where I started this to where I'm going now is that just before I came on tonight, a number of major news networks, television news networks, announced they are not carrying this speech. Now that's common, actually. It's prime time, right? And it's what is today, Thursday. It's good prime time, and they refused to carry Joe Biden's speech about the dangers against democracy, which in retrospect looks like it probably was a bad move, right? They will stream it. But if you've ever watched a streaming political speech, which I actually do on a fairly frequent basis, it just doesn't get a lot of people turning up for it. And honestly, I tend myself to wait until they're over. And if there's something I need to hear, I either read the transcript and flip over. I've told you how to read this transcripts. Remember, you go to YouTube, pick one of the many instances of a video, and then click on the explanatory description of it. And then it will have a transcript. It appears in a weird place. It appears on the far right-hand side of the screen, and you can scroll through it. And then if there's something you want to hear, if you click on it, it adjusts the film to wherever it is you want to hear. So you don't have to go through, thank you, Joe, for me, my whatever, and being here. You can skip all that stuff and just get into the meat of whatever it is you want to hear. And even still, if I listen to long speeches, I speed them way, way, way up. They sound a little bit like chipmunks sometimes, but if you need to slow it down, you can. Anyway, all that to say, there's just not going to be that many people who are watching it on prime time. And the reason that matters is twofold. One is it matters because the what I would call the fact-based media who operate outside the legacy media space, people like me, have known for a long time that Trump is untrustworthy. And the more you feed that, the more you're basically giving him free advertising. So you're better off waiting and seeing if he said anything important and then either telling people that or telling them in such a way that you can say when he says they're teasing that he's going to say there was some foreign interference in the 2020 election. And um all of us have read all that stuff. Foreign countries always trying to interfere in our elections, and the all the analysis say that they just didn't succeed in 2020. um but and one wonders if he's going to try and say that the former leader of Venezuela is going to confess to something, because frankly, the minute that Trump grabbed Nicolas Maduro and his wife and dragged him off to the US, lots of people were saying, oh, he's just going to get him to say uh, that they interfered in the 2020 elections so that they can get a lighter sentence, basically. Who knows what he's going to say? But it matters, first of all, because the media is starting to see him for what he is. But here's another really, really big way in which it matters. Trump lives for the TV cameras. All eyes on Trump all the time. And this is one of the reasons we're all exhausted. Like, even if you loved something, you didn't want to watch it nonstop, full time for 9 years. And the fact that the major outlets, and I think it is ABC and NBC so far, have said they won't carry it. It suggests that Trump's power to command eyeballs is falling away. And when that happens, if that happens, the difference in a political moment between a rising authoritarian and a powerful politician, they're on a trajectory. You can feel the momentum. But when the momentum dies, that whole thing turns on a dime. And if we are seeing the moment where Americans, not all of them, you're never going to get all of them, but where a majority of Americans say, dude's a loser, even I wish him well, but I need him out of my life, all of a sudden things change in a hurry. And that's what happened with Herbert Hoover during the Depression. The moment when people finally were like, go away, was the moment when there was room for real oxygen for the different voices that finally put FDR in office. And once again, like I always say with Lincoln, FDR was not alone. There were lots of people in his moment critiquing what was happening at the national level. FDR is the one who ended up in office for various reasons, the same way Lincoln was. We are creating that set of people right now for the next political generation in the United States. And we don't even know who they all are yet. I'm sure you have your own favorite people that is great, and you've gotten great new voices all across the country. But we are in the process of creating that. And so I think what you're seeing big picture here is Trump trying desperately to cling on to power and his loyalists around him trying to prop him up. But even hesitation among Republicans in the Senate, for example, but in the House of Representatives, who are mad at him for one reason or another, who recognize he is not making good decisions, perhaps, but who are also looking at his waning political power and thinking, now would be a really good time not to be tied to Donald Trump. So that's what I am seeing. And I am not making any promises that this is over or any of the many things that one could say. It's going to be bad. It's going to get worse. Those concentration camps are still out there. Those ICE agents are still out there. The CDC and our research institutions are in real trouble. Our arts and literature organizations are in real trouble. Prices are right. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, then I'll depress you all. But the momentum increasingly seems to be on the side of the people who are pushing back against that. And the more we keep that going, and there's a number of marches happening, certainly continue to reach out to your representatives, even if they're sending you crap back and all that, especially if you're in a state that's got a Senate race that is looks like it may go Democratic. Speak up, talk to those people all the time, talk to your friends. And I have to say, I'm here in Maine, I live in Maine, and it's really interesting because Graham Plattner, who was the Democratic nominee for Senate, imploded and fell away. And I heard ads today from the Collins campaign that are still about Graham Plattner. They clearly wanted to run against Graham Plattner. And they've sort of tried to turn it into, we're still running against Graham Plattner, and they're not. So you can see they're nervous even in the state of Maine. And the more pressure we can keep up over the course of this summer, first of all, the more erratic it's going to make President Trump. But the more chances there are not only that we can push back against our elected representatives in November, but also that people who would like to stay in office as Republicans and who are not implicated in any of the wrongdoing of the Trump administration will start to break away from him. And if they start to break away from him, still a very big if, we have a lot more possibilities going forward. So the news is nuts. It just is nuts. There's too much happening. It's like, and then I didn't even talk about his corruption. That's a story for another day. It's really hard to focus, but that's in part because it is so choppy. There's so much going on. But, hold true to the North Star, right? We care about democracy. We should care about the people around the globe and the people we live with. There are certain basic things we have that the government should be doing, and that right now it isn't. It should be protecting us, keeping us safe. They have gutted, those institutions that do that. They should be making it easy for people to have the basics they need to achieve what they want through hard work, which means we should be able to afford food. We should be able to afford housing. We should be able to afford education and the ability to get the skills we need to have control over our own destinies. And we absolutely should have the right to agree to live under the government that is making laws for us, which is all of those things are guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence. If you'd like to tune in live, I record these chats on Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Maine time on both my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. If you want to hear more from me, I write Letters from an American every night. It's available on Substack and on Facebook, and the audio version of the nightly letter is available the following day wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, on Saturday mornings, I talk with Dr. Joanne Freeman, the historian of the early republic, professor, and dear friend, about history and politics. We call our talks What the Heck Just Happened, and you can find them on YouTube. Politics Chat is produced by Lauren Westfall, music by Andrea Von Kampen.